So, sure enough, almost an hour exactly to the dot later, Chris shows up. Chris is heavyset Latino. He's probably in his 30s, probably 300 plus pounds, maybe 5'6", shorter dude. And he hops out of the car, and immediately on his face, I could see that he knew he had bit off more than he could chew. There's one thing to have him there, but there's a whole nother thing to safely load this vehicle onto his truck, which clearly was not designed to support this. Uh, so we spent the next 30 minutes trying to figure this out, and I was like, Chris, I don't know if this is gonna work. I don't know what if this angle is working here, but I just had to trust him. And Lynn, because she was still there, grabs me and she goes, "Hey, you let him do what he needs to do." And she closes her eyes and she just puts her hands out towards the car. She sits there. And I don't know if it's because of what she did or not. I would bet that it probably is a part of it, but he ended up getting it up there safely and strapping it down. And I mean, if you saw it, it was a wild thing to see because it was a 12-foot tall vehicle on top of another like 5-foot tall platform. So it was like 7 feet, 17 feet. So obviously we couldn't drive it very far because clearance anyway. It looked insane. Everybody who saw us on the highway or just driving on the streets or we stopped at a gas station was just like bewildered. So I say my goodbyes to Lynn, exchange information. Yes, I do plan on going back to see her. Um, and we take off. And I start to talk to Chris, and I'm just getting a feel into his life. He works nights, has been working nights for 10 years, has a kid. And he has a whole crew of people that work different night shifts that play Call of Duty together. And they just sit around and play Call of Duty in their different respective fields. And when one of them gets called, they take off and they go. And it's like, wow, what an interesting world. It's again, couldn't be different than mine. I work during the day, you work at night. I'm not really a huge gamer, but you game and that's where you get your community from. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's just it was just like be willing to accept that people are different than you and they can help you. Maybe somebody's different than you and they know something that you don't know, and you have to trust them to get to that next step. Chris was that for me, for sure. So we drive an hour, we unload the vehicle. I text George. Remember, George is the guy at the tire shop who is still awake at like 11 p.m. and texts me and goes, "Hey man, if you're in town, these are the places to stay. This is the local restaurant in case you want some food." I'm like, I've never even met you. I I don't know. It blows my mind how kind, truly kind, some people are. But I take his recommendation. I'm in this tiny town. I think it was called Junction. You can look it up. It's tiny, tiny town. Probably population 500 to 1,000. A couple gas stations, two hotels, a subway, a restaurant, and a tire shop, pretty much. So I get there. I go check into a Holiday Inn. So I text George the next day. He goes, "Hey, I'm going to drive down and see if I can get those parts." Drives over to get the parts. As he's doing that, I start calling more tow companies. I'm getting the same deal. Called dozens of tow companies. I get to the point where I'm at call, I counted 119. 119 calls. I'm in sales. I've cold called before. 119 calls is a lot of calls, right? So uh, I finally get a guy on the phone who goes, "I could do it for 5,500." He wanted $5,500 to drive my car 2 hours. Hung up, obviously. A little bit discouraged at this point because I've been sitting in this hotel room all day. And mind you, I don't have an extra pair of clothes because the clothes were on the other side of the RV. I didn't even think to go in and get a pair. So, just sitting there, I smell. I'm eating terrible food from gas station, and I text George, and I'm hoping, like, hey man, did you figure something out? You're gonna be able to do it. This is on Friday, and George goes, no man, I don't think I'm gonna be able to get those parts in until Wednesday. I am still 2.5 hours away from Austin. He's not gonna get the parts in for another 5 days. So obviously, I kept calling tow companies because there was no way I was staying in that town for another 5 days. There's nothing to do. There's nothing there, and I had none of my stuff. So I finally get a company on the phone that goes, "Yeah, we could do it for 3 grand, 3,000." Hesitantly, I was like, "Okay, the only thing I got, I'll figure it out." So I say yes, and immediately when I hang up the phone, I go, "Why would I do that? Why would I say yes to that? If I just wait for this car to get the tire, I can get it towed next week. I don't have to be here to get the car towed, right? The car can get towed. I trust George with my life at this point. That's the new plan. I'm going to cancel the tow. I'm going to leave the car here with George. I'm just going to get myself with the clothes that I have on my back. And maybe if I can get in there tomorrow to get some clothes, I'm going to get myself back to Austin. At least I have people there. I have people I can stay with." So I go online and I go try to rent a car. The nearest rental car place is an hour away in Kerrville. Kerrville is still 2 hours from Austin. So it's like, okay, I'm going to book this vehicle and I'm just going to take an Uber into Kerrville tomorrow. I'll pay whatever I got to pay. But first things first, I need to get up. I need to get George to put the RV up on a jack so I can go in and get the clothes out. So I text George that night. He puts the RV up on a jack that night. The next morning, I get up. It's 9 a.m. I go over. I walk over. It's about a mile from where I am, probably less. And I go inside, get a duffel bag, and I just throw some random clothes in there. And I see some of the damage on the inside. It's a pretty depressing scene to look at this vehicle that had just got me so far, and look at it and be like, you can't serve me right now. But think about that. How many times has a vehicle, something in life, gotten us so far, and then there just comes a day where it doesn't serve us anymore? So I take all the stuff, walk back. As I'm walking back, I go, let me just call the rental car place to double check, make sure they're good with my reservation. So I call them and I say, hey, you guys got this reservation? This is my last name. They go, yeah, we got it, but you need to get here soon because we close at noon. And I realize, oh shit, today's Saturday. They do close at noon. I thought I had all day to get over there, and it's 10 o'clock at this point. So I start like, okay, let me get an Uber, let me get a taxi. I go on Uber. There are no Ubers in the area. There's no Lyfts in this area. They just don't exist. It is that remote. So I go to the front desk at my hotel and I ask her, like, hey, just to double check, are there any Lyfts? Are there any Ubers? No. Okay. Um, are there taxis in this town? Maybe I could take it. No, there's no taxis. Is there a public transportation? Like, is there a bus that goes to Curb? No, there's no bus. So how does one get out of this town? Clearly, the only way was with a car. I start to get creative, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to go out on the side of the road and hitchhike and try to get an hour drive down the road in the next 2 hours. And if that's what's required, then that is what's required. So I put my bag over my shoulder. I go outside, and I go outside the subway where the gas station is, and I get a hit. And I go, wait a second. Before I do that, remember that guy that George recommended me to first? That young, hungry guy that was gonna tow me, but then realized he couldn't. I think he lives in this town. I'm pretty sure that's what he said because that's how George knows him. Let me try him. So I call him. Orlando picks up the phone. He's like, "Yes, sir." Like, hey, man, You may not remember me, but we talked last night. He's like, oh no, I remember you. This is pretty weird, but if I paid you, would you drive me about an hour? It's like, well, I can't pick up the vehicle. And I'm like, well, no, no vehicle, just me. And I kid you not, he didn't even ask a second question. He goes, yeah, I could do that. And I'm like, all right, man, I'm at the subway. He's like, okay, cool. Let me get a cup of coffee. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Again, how nice people are blows my mind. It gave me so much faith in humanity. But, anyways, 10 minutes goes by, about 15 realistically. He was a little late. Go inside, buy him a water, come outside. Hey, man, what's going on? Introduce myself. Orlando has a huge beard from here to here. He's ripping one of those huge Monster energy drinks. He's got a massive, like one of those big cloud vapes. And collectively, I don't know how many teeth he has, but he does not have at least 5 of the proper teeth that he's supposed to have. And you feel that judge brain go on, right? But I'm like, hey man, this is amazing. This dude's gonna drive me. I'm gonna get a rental car. I'm getting closer to Austin. Works for me. So I get in and I start talking to him. We start driving. You could tell he didn't have a place to open up to other men. And when he got a man in the car who he could open up with, the floodgates opened up. He got into talking about some things about his family, about alcoholism in his family and how it's affected them, and passing of his brother, passing of his mother. And before I knew it, we're talking about God, the divine, and he's dropping a tear. He's dropping a tear in this front seat. And I'm just sitting in there realizing, like, in the midst of all this, human beings, as much as we cause each other pain, we also have so much healing for each other. Um, it's just ingrained in us. It's the reason why community matters so much to us. And sometimes it's as simple as being there to see someone, being there to hear someone. And we get to the rental car place, and after just having a very heartfelt time, I shake his hand, but like, you know, like an I see you kind of shake. And I told him, hey man, when this car is ready next week, there is no one I would rather have tow it than you. He smiled, he accepted, he thanked me for the time, paid him, and he took off. There I was after 2 or 3 days, 1 hour closer to Austin. So I walk into the rental car place. They go, oh yeah, sounds good. We got it all set up outside. We just need a card on file. I go to give them my credit card, and they go, uh, we don't take this card. Like, what do you mean? It's a Visa. We don't take Visa. I go, okay. So I go, MasterCard. We don't take MasterCard. What do you take? Discover. It's like, I didn't even know people still had Discover. Like, who only takes Discover? And he explains to me that because I live more than 40 miles from there, that they'll only take Discover, which makes no sense. And this guy has no empathy. And just was like, yeah, no, there's nothing I could do. So I'm like, okay, let's think through this because I'm too close at this point. So uh, my dad has the same name as me. My dad probably has a Discover card because he just would. So I call him. I'm like, hey, do you have a Discover card? Yeah, I got a Discover card. Can I get the numbers so I can put them in? I'll pay you back. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. He ain't a stranger, but he helped me out too, right? So I write the numbers and I go inside. I go to give him the numbers and he goes, oh, no. I need the physical card here. I can't get the physical card here. My dad lives in New Jersey. It's like a couple thousand miles away. He goes, well, I can't rent this out to you. So now I'm stuck in a place where, yeah. So I go, I take a breath, sitting outside the place. I'm fuming at this point, but like I said, I try to remain cool under pressure, keep a clear head, make good decisions. Um, Call a taxi company. Maybe we'll try that because we are in a slightly bigger town. He tells me he can come get me, but in 8 hours. So that's not an option. Um, I considered going to Home Depot and getting one of those rent a cars that you use to like move stuff. But there was something that happened with the Home Depot where it didn't make sense. I think it was just like, yeah, it just didn't make sense, whatever it was. So then I was like, all right, let me try an Uber. So call Uber, or I put in the address on Uber. It's a 2 hour plus Uber drive, right? So I put it in. 5 minutes goes by. 10 minutes goes by, and I pretty much settled in at this point that I'm not getting picked up. I got to figure out a place to stay in this town. And then I look back at my phone, and sure enough, Tammy had accepted my Uber request. So Tammy pulls up. Tammy is a woman in her mid 40s, black woman, short haircut, with all of the energy in the world. You know how you get in your Uber and you're like, you got to do that whole thing. Oh, hey guys, how long you been doing Uber? That whole thing. But then after that, it usually gets quiet. No, not with Tammy. Not with Tammy. Tammy started going. She started telling me about all this music that she likes and started playing things for me and stopped to the store and was like, you want something from the store? I was like, no. And it was interesting because she was so nice, that it was like you kind of have to accept it because she's got such a good heart. And I start leaning into it, right? Because I'm pulling back, I'm aggravated, but I start leaning into it. And next thing you know, we're listening to Prince albums, full albums, like from beginning to end. She's telling me about what it was like growing up um, back in like the 70s and the 80s. I think it was the 80s. And what it was like having Prince's music and things like that. And we get to talking about her current living situation. She's in a halfway house. She had, alcoholism, but she had recently celebrated her 1 year sober. So we started to talk about that and everything that had done in her life and everything that had done for her children. And man, it was just seeing perseverance right in front of me. You know, sometimes the most unexpected people, again, have these lessons for you. She was perseverance to the T. She was what it looks like to get up and enjoy your day and give everything you have to this day because you know how dark this life can be. You appreciate it when it is light. And just get up one day, every day, and put one foot in front of the other. And she just inspired me so much. And Tammy had never been to Austin, even though she lived 2 hours away. So we took a detour and I had her drive so she could see the skyline. I got her number and told her, like, hey, if you're ever in Austin, like, we'll eat some barbecue. She was so excited to just see the skyline and, make a friend. And yeah, she was a whole lesson in herself. And then, about 20 minutes outside of Austin, I realized, like, which you guys have probably realized at this point, but I got rid of my apartment. I got rid of my car. And most of my friends are still traveling. So I don't actually have a place to go. And I don't have a car. And I kind of need that. I hop on Turo, sign up, make an account. And I ended up getting a guy to meet me at the airport, Maxwell. He's a young guy in his 20s from Africa, big smile. Met me at the airport, and there was nothing inherently that stood out about Maxwell, but he was the last stranger that got me in a place where once I sat down in his car, I finally felt safe. My nervous system had been jacked up from the last 2, 3 days, not knowing what comes next. At the very least, if I couldn't find a place to sleep, I could sleep in that car for the next couple days, which I didn't do, but I came close. Um, but without those six strangers, I don't know if I would have learned those lessons. I needed to learn those. If I'm someone who's going to help the world, if I'm someone who is going to and who does help people, I need to accept and love people for who they are and the gifts that they have. And that's the reminder. Everyone has something for you. And it's impossible not to love someone if you get close enough. And I know that human beings, we cause a lot of pain for each other. But more often than not, I think we actually are lights and we cause a lot of joy for each other. We just see so much highlighted in the news and the media of the downside that we forget about the upside of who we are as a people. So that's my story. I hope it gives you a little bit more trust in humanity. And I hope that it invites you to get closer to someone and fall in love with them today.